So this is our November call for Think Tank and our last call of 2024. And we've had a good run together this year. Appreciate all you guys who came to Think Tank in the live version here in Vegas. We had a fantastic time. It was phenomenal. And just really, I hope it was beneficial, not only the content, but even more so, we got a ton of feedback on the relational aspects of things. So we wanted to give you guys just preliminary dates. There's no action you need to take right now, but our dates for the Think Tank Live, okay, still arranging. So our dates for the Think Tank Live in 2025 is a long way off, but what we would love for you, to do is mark these dates down and just as a hold in your calendar, because we know October gets kind of crazy. We've got some new things that we're going to introduce in 2025 as well, especially for those of you that happen to be Growmentum clients at the moment. We've got some additional stuff we're going to do. So just go into your calendar right now, if you wouldn't mind, and mark down the 15th through the 17th of October of 2025. You have to scroll way back in your Google Cal to get there, but just block those dates out. It's a Wednesday night through a Friday. We would love to have you be a part of it. We won't get deep into this, but just so you know, those of you on the call, our time together is really designed for what we would call executive table leaders. So this isn't for your entire staff. It's not designed for your entire staff. It's really designed for those that are decision makers, setting the course for your church and your organization or nonprofit. So we want to be a part of that. And then one more partner thing we want to do real quick before we get into our content today. Jeremy Peterson has been a great just a fan of Growmentum from almost day one, and we have been partnering with Jeremy, and they have an event sponsored by CDF that's coming up sooner. And Jeremy has been gracious enough to give anyone that's part of the Growmentum network a substantial discount to be part of it. This is an event that Growmentum is at every year. Jeremy's invited us to contribute to it. We've led breakouts and provided content, and we plan on being there again. It's basically Nashville. It says Franklin, but it's Nashville, I think. Is that right, Jeremy? And it's a great event. Jeremy, take 30 seconds and tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll mute you if you go too long.
Yeah, sure. It's at the Bridge Church just south of Nashville, and it's specifically for executive pastors. And so I know, Lee, you will be there, Brandon, Bachman, several others will be there. So if you're in that role, then we'd love for you guys to join us.
It's a great time to get together. It is for XPs. So if you're a lead guy, it's not for you. But if you have an XP or someone who serves in that number 2 chair, they would really benefit from it. And it's pretty intimate. So it's similar to Think Tank Live in that it's not massive. And so there's a lot of relational connection. And talking to Jeremy, it's about 70% full at the moment. So it's one of those things that we wanted to present now because it will fill up. And so there's a code there to use it. Cool. Jeremy, did we cover it?
Yeah, thanks.
Great. We'll put it in the email follow-up as well. As with all these calls, if you're new or haven't been on for a while, you will get all of this deck and you will get the recording of this call sometime late this evening or first thing in the morning. So there's things that you can review, or if there's things that you want to talk to your team about. All right. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a couple of things as we close it out. I don't know if you guys know, but Christmas is coming. So if you didn't know that, we have a special announcement today. We want to give you some final thoughts and maybe a little bit of a unique perspective around Christmas. And then, as hard as it is, part of our role at Growmentum is to shove on you guys a little bit. And so in the midst of your Christmas prep and holiday stuff and all of that, we wanted to give you some probing questions around 2025 that potentially could be really helpful for you to use with your team as you look past the holidays and look into the first quarter and first half of 25. So I'm going to throw it to Kay for a few minutes, and we're going to talk a little bit about just some final perspectives. Really, I know you guys have. If you haven't planned, if you don't know all that stuff, I really want to just pause and pray for you right now. But most of you, you're full into your Christmas stuff. So you're like, well, what can you tell us? I think there's some stuff that this can just kind of help you as you look at perspective. So, Kay, take it away and lead us through this.
Yeah, so let's just zoom in a little bit on Christmas. Obviously, it's top of mind for us, but one of the things that we thought about as we've been testing this out a little bit with our clients and understanding a little bit about the differences between Christmas and Easter. So it's interesting because when we think about Christmas and Easter, we put it in the category as church leaders as the Super Bowl weekends, right? Like it is on the calendar, largest attendance of the year. Both weekends are heavily attended, high energy. We put a lot of significant planning and preparation for each one of those weekends. And it's the scale of it, the importance of it is so important. But we also know that certain people, we call them CEOs, right? Like Christmas and Easter only people. That these are the Sundays that they're there. Well, one of the things that we want to maybe potentially challenge around the CEO people is that maybe the people who are coming to Christmas are not actually the people that are coming to Easter, and the people who are coming to Easter are not necessarily the people that are coming to Christmas. Now, obviously, there is overlap. And we're talking specifically around the guest, right? Like not just the people who are regular attenders that will be there at those events or those weekends, but specifically the guests that will be coming to Christmas or Easter. So when we think about that, uh, Christmas services, what we have seen is it attracts people who don't necessarily attend church, right, from the guest perspective, but they're really drawn by the family traditions, the nostalgia, the festivities, the atmosphere of the Christmas season. And so they see this really as a cultural connection. It's a cultural celebration. And because of that, many times what we as church, we can really be able to leverage this moment and this weekend to be able to be more accessible to the unchurched. Now, again, we all as church leaders probably have said, all right, Christmas and Easter, this is for the unchurched and invite your guests and all those things. But we're trying to parse out a little bit of the differences that we've seen with Christmas and Easter. And so many times for Christmas, because of that, they are coming on the arms of their family members because their family wants to come and take a picture together and experience Christmas. And this is part of the Christmas season that they're celebrating together. And so, because of that, there's this prime opportunity for this relational connection, this warm, welcoming environment, but at the same time, they might not be so eagerly wanting to come to church next Sunday, right? Like they might be a little bit further down the road than maybe when we juxtapose it against Easter and the potential guest audience there. So when we talk about Easter, for example, it is directly tied with the faith, right? It is to our core beliefs. It is about the resurrection and the hope that we have in Jesus. But because of that, what we actually have seen is that the guests are actually a little bit more of the de-churched people, not necessarily the unchurched people. So, from an unchurched perspective, because the Christmas season and the cultural context of that, they're much more open to come. But Easter, we're talking about the blood and the resurrection and the hope and all that, and they don't necessarily have a connection except for the Easter bunny, which we don't do much about that. And so, because of that, it is a little bit of a different audience that it reaches. And so, it might be a really interesting conversation to have with your staff to be able to say, okay, are we treating Christmas and Easter very similarly in the approach and the audience and our strategies and all those things? Or maybe it might be a little bit different. So, Easter, for example, the audience might be people who are really looking for some hope or some renewal or some like re-engagement to to faith or to a spiritual connection. Maybe they've been away, and because of Easter, they just know that they grew up going to Easter, that they're supposed to be there. Versus Christmas, once again, can be a little bit of a different audience. And so, you guys have seen us, talk about the spiritual spectrum, and basically the spiritual spectrum of a -5, who's somebody who's antagonistic against Jesus, and +5 is a mature follower of Jesus. We've been calling this the Saul Paul scale, right? You can't get any more antagonistic against Christians like Saul could on -5. And then a +5, any more mature than writing half the New Testament. And 0 is the point of conversion. So when you think about the spiritual spectrum, it's interesting, with the left being, part of your mission statement, that's the find Jesus part, and the right, that's more the follow Jesus part, that maybe Christmas and Easter audience, the guest we're speaking of here are reaching a little bit differently as far as the crowd goes. And so Christmas might be a little bit more like the -3, -4, all the way to a 0. That might be the guests that are coming. And Easter might be more like a -1 to a +1 that they're re-engaging. Now, again, when we say +1 too, we're not saying how many years they've been a Christian, because they could have been a Christian for a very, very long time, and yet they've never matured in their faith. In fact, that's probably why they're only coming to Easter, right? So that's what we're talking about as far as the spiritual spectrum goes. So I'll pause here. Lee, if you want to add anything, any questions, thoughts, confirmations, pushbacks, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, you guys should unmute if you want, but and we're going to move to like what's the application, because again, what Kay's sharing is so good, not based necessarily on programming, though. If some of you need to go back and talk to your teams and tweak that a little bit, but maybe more on response, which we're going to talk about a little bit when we basically look at where Kay's laid this on the spectrum, right? That it potentially could be a little further left than what we typically would see with an Easter audience. Any thoughts on that at all? Questions? Okay, do you want to put the next one up?
I'll
or you want to,
speak.
oh, go ahead. Please go. Yes, please.
This is Leto here. Lee, nice to see you. There's a Thomas
Leto.
Rayner scale. There's a Thomas Rayner scale that does, and he did not name it, similar thing about the -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but I've never seen anything on the other scale of like the Paul to completely unsaved. So I really like this. Like this really spoke to me as something visually I think Christian leaders need to see and question where people are at, so we have a better idea of how to reach them where they're at.
We use this scale all the time. For some of you, we think you may have seen this before, but as part of our S&P, we use this scale. So some of you, this may be brand new, a visual for you. Again, you're going to get this. And we use it in a variety of ways to really think about what are our specific ministries targeting? What is our weekends targeting? And we believe we want to target all the way, at least from a -3 to a +5 for sure. This isn't an argument to only target one side. It's an argument to go holistically, what are we doing within our ministry that actually has a chance to reach across the spectrum? And when we talk about Church on Mission, which is one of our models that many of you use, we really see a +5 being someone who's clearly living a life on mission. And so we just need to understand that as we prepare for Christmas, if we believe that our -3.5s to 0s are going to be in the room with grandma lighting a candle, then there's probably some responses or some slight things that we need to do to reflect that.
Yeah, one of the things that really made me think about this years ago is when I went to Montreal, Canada. So we had a client there. They're doing incredible things, reaching actually unchurched people. And so we had this kind of conversation about Easter and Christmas, and they were saying that their Christmas services were twice the size of their Easter services. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because here in America, most of the times, probably all the people that's represented here, Easter and Christmas is about the same. And so because it's about the same, we think that it's the same audience, the same type of people. But when we think about Canada, when we think about Montreal, Quebec area, they are very postmodern, and they don't have a concept of de-church because they really didn't grow up with that concept. Or there's less de-church people, but there are a lot of unchurched people, and the Christmas season actually invites them. So their strategy actually, changed because of that. And so we were just having some, thoughts around what can we do to be able to approach this differently? So many times, and this is the other scale that we use, which is the influence spectrum. So you've probably seen this before, where really when we try to bring somebody from not knowing who our church is all the way to becoming an evangelist, we want them to be exposed to who we are. So that they know that we exist. We want them to be endeared to who we are, because do they care that we exist? We want them to be better because we exist from an engagement perspective, and ultimately they can be an evangelist so that they can invite their friends to be to know that we exist. So this is kind of the spectrum that we use from an influence perspective. 0 is the point of when they actually get connected to your church. So if we look at this Christmas,
So the difference, Kay, real quick, just just to interrupt you briefly. So
Yeah.
that the first one is really, where is someone in their relationship with Christ?
Yeah.
This spectrum is really specifically case speaking to where is someone in their relationship to your church, and
Yes.
that's obviously not always the same, correct?
Correct.
And so
Yeah.
that's really clear that you see that.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, for that clarification, because obviously when we put two tools like this together, it could be assumed. And so, but yes, the first one is their relationship with Jesus. This one is relationship with the church. And so if Christmas is a little bit different and the audience is a little bit different, then could what we do is more of an exposure to an endearment. Like obviously they've been exposed to the church because they can now come, but maybe the focus should be more on endearment. And maybe for Easter, it's actually endearment to engagement so that they can actually, find hope, find faith, find re-engagement, find, those type of things. And so then our call to actions, our strategies, the way that we actually do contact, and even our expectations on will they actually make a step or not, it should be calculated in the way that we see the audience. So all that to say, the more disconnected you are, the less likely they're going to take a step the next week, right? Because it takes time to be able to move across this spiritual spectrum or even this influence spectrum. So they might be more on the left side, and maybe Christmas and our expectations around that is just to be able to say, we're just trying to move them a little bit more to the right side. We don't have these hopes that says, okay, after Christmas, we're going to have a baptism service because we hope that they're going to get baptized, right? That's a little bit, but actually the Easter baptisms make a lot more sense because people are now re-engaging, let's say, for example, with the church. So all that to say, it should affect our strategies and our expectations.
Let's go to those questions, Kate, real quick, and the
All right.
realities, and then we'll open it up for convo.
All right.
So
Go ahead, Lee.
here's 4 of the realities, and these are sort of more of a kind of a summary of what Kate's talking about. Is like we want you guys to press into the question. Number one, have we adequately equipped our team and designed our we're speaking specifically to whatever your high point of Christmas is, right? Typically your Christmas or Christmas Eve services. Have we vetted them and filtered them through the lens of, primarily for those that aren't part of our church, how would we move that? How can we potentially move them from exposure to a sense of endearment? Okay, Kay talked about that. But the idea is when they are ready to embed in a church, when they have spiritual questions, when they have a crisis in their life, will they be more likely to reach out to your church? Because they're probably not likely to come back the following Sunday. But when it's because they're endeared, I like this place, it's a safe place, the message makes sense, they're there. So think about that, because again, it is all of those things where I call it the Jonathan Lee factor. Some of you guys, if you came to Vegas, you went to Jonathan Lee's house, some of you, but he is a great friend of mine, and every Christmas, he's a Christian, but every Christmas his entire family extended will be here at the Crossing. And I mean, it's 25 to 30 people, and they probably actually represent the spectrum that Kay put up a moment ago. Everywhere from +3s, his dad's a pastor, all the way to -3s, where, people that are just cousin whoever, but they're here and they're there. The second one, the spectrum reality should inform strategies. Both of those spectrums, we want you to use and think about them and intentionally lean into any vibe implications that needs to have, practically, what that looks like, which leads to number 3. Big advocates of this on our team is, as you guys think about your guest identification strategies, because if you've been around Growmentum, if you've been around Brandon or Derek or any of these guys, they're always going to constantly talk about your pathway. And our primary way is we want people to identify themselves, right? We talk about how when someone identifies and gives us their information, that is a trust move, and their expectation is we're going to do something with it. What we have found historically, both here at the Crossing and a lot of our churches, is, and you may be different, and that's fine, I'd love to hear about it, our identification strategies on Christmas, if we run the same play, they typically fail. They're typically low. They're typically less than impressive and stellar. Some of the reasons is because people are more left. They're not trusting us. or just the holiday itself. They want to get in, they want to get out. They're not going to go to your welcome center. They're not going to watch your video. They're not going to go to a side room and interact with somebody because they're going to Christmas dinner or they're going to Christmas brunch or etc. So we would say uncomplicate and incentivize getting people to identify themselves as guests. Lower the expectation of what you want. And do it in a way that's key. One of the things that we've started to do here, where I spend my primary time, is we have de-emphasized the Connect card on Christmas, and we have overemphasized some other ways to capture, not in a bait and switch way, but to capture people's information. I.e., a lot of you are all about photo booths and all of that, which is totally fine. But if you're doing those sorts of things, you should be doing them not only to provide a service and an endearment experience, but also as a potential means to capture names and identifications of people, to check in any of those things. The one thing I would tell you that we would encourage you to do, please do not run those people through your normal pathway of follow-up. Let me say it again. Please do not run those people through your normal path. If what Kay is saying is true and you just run them through your normal -1 pathway, it's not only is it not effective, it's probably off-putting to them. And so we would advocate that you queue them up together as your Christmas. These are your folks that came at Christmas, and have a unique, specific, we would call it opt-in strategy for them. In other words, hey, thanks for being here at Christmas. If you're sending them a text, if you'd like more information, opt in. Do not assume they want your spam. Give them one more opportunity to opt in and to actually, because then you're going to filter it down to the people that you are moving more towards endearment. So there's a little practice there. And then that's at the bottom there. The guest follow-up specific to Christmas. Bridge the gap. It's really gonna be a very basic step, not a leap, as far as what they may do next. So be aware of that. I'll shut up for a second. Comments, thoughts, any of our team want to weigh in? Go for it. Wide open. Don't everybody speak at once.
It's a bad small group.
Is anybody, it really is. Is anybody doing anything? I'm bad at small groups anyway. Is anybody on the call? And I don't want to get too far into this, so be careful, use your filter. Is anybody tackling the guest part of what Kay talked about in any kind of a unique fashion, or at least starting to question it in the last 10 minutes and thinking about what we might do to better do that? Anybody want to offer us some info on that? Some of it's contextual for sure. I realize some of you guys are in different contexts, and so you may treat it a little bit differently.
I can say something, Lee.
Sharon, thanks for being here.
We did the photo booth kind of thing last year, and that worked really well. People were so excited to get a little family picture on Christmas Eve, and we took their information. But I think where we didn't do well, which just struck me with what Kay said, is we didn't do a unique opt-in type situation with the text. So I'm going to change that this year. I think that's a great idea.
Especially when they don't know, Sharon, that they're giving you their information for that purpose, right? If they're giving you their information because you're going to send them a photo or you're going to do whatever, I think we are respecting them and actually going to have more impact if we treat them as a -3. I appreciate that. Other thoughts?
I guess that's even a question to you guys. Do you guys experience this from a perspective of like after Easter, do you find more engagement versus after Christmas? And maybe if you are, that's one of the reasons why. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it could be very interesting to be able to actually put this in front of your staff and say, hey, do we see any differences between our guest audience for Christmas and Easter? And if we do, should we, change our approach? I mean, I would actually even think about it, even as a communicator, as a lead pastor. It's like, okay, what are the things that actually trigger this audience versus what triggers this audience in Easter with hope and re-engagement with faith and all those things. So I do think that there's probably even implications even from a preaching and teaching perspective too. All right. I think, Lee, we've got this one as well. So you want to take that one?
Yeah, so just before we move on, we would leave you with these thought process. How are we in intentionally addressing where our guests are on the spiritual spectrum? So thinking about their personal relationship with Christ, where are they? And how do we nudge them even a little bit more right by leveraging the Christmas experience? And then number two, how can we invite movement or create environments that actually move them potentially from exposure, which is they now know we exist, to actually a relationship that cares that we exist, maybe even loves that we exist from an endearment standpoint. And those are nuanced things that you can do that actually create those kind of environments that do this. Again, all of this is based on our principles that everything is contextual. So we are process, you are content and context. So you got to take all this and run it through your context. And secondly, our hope would be that you are running a long game as far as how Christ is going to impact people's hearts and lives in the community you're in. So if you've been doing this long enough, you are excited about Christmas and Easter, but you probably have a reality check around how much impact it's actually going to have specific to your church. And we're building upon it, right? So these strategies, we believe in the last 20 minutes can actually take on more of a building approach than we think it's going to blow up approach. Take more of a building approach. How do we build on the people that are coming in? All right, cool. We're going to pivot hard. So last call for any
Lee,
comment or feedback.
Lee, I
Yes,
just,
please, Chris.
Go ahead.
you want me to go?
Yeah.
Maybe even to an insight to add as I was thinking about it, I feel like for us, Christmas has always tapped into the family. Like, people don't invite their friends to our Christmas services; they invite their family primarily.
Yes.
Easter, they'll invite both, right? They'll invite both family and friends. But because Christmas is something people do on their way to something more important, they bring their family to church, and then they all go and do the family activity. And so I think strategically, like
Good.
speaking to the family in the message, making what you do more family oriented than you would maybe at Easter is something that you can do. Like we talk about the cultural connection, it's based around family, whereas Easter and the faith connection, it really is based around faith. And we found that to be with our guest cards. Like the only people that fill out Connect cards at Christmas Eve are family members. Like, and most of those family are coming from out of town, so they're not even around us. So it's a unique one for us. So it was just a take on what you guys already said.
Yeah, and just to even just nuance that a little bit as far as the family goes, that's why we believe that like family, it's almost like an obligation, right? Like I got, like you don't have a choice in some sense. And so because of that, it slides a little bit more towards the left that they wouldn't have come by themselves, but they feel obligated to because their family is coming or because this is a family thing. And so because of that, obviously it's like if we want to be intentional about reaching those people versus Easter. So I think that's spot on, Chris.
Chris, thank you for that. Somebody else unmuted before. Who else was?
Yeah, I was just going to throw it out there. Whatever your pathway and process is for connecting guests and things, one of the things we really recommend is have someone on your team or have someone secret shop that process. I think a lot of times if you're in the executive role, you're like, yeah, we have a process. There's a QR code or there's whatever. When's the last time you actually went through that and saw what people receive and what is the response they get? Is it automated? Is it personal? Does it look like a invoice that they get? There's so much of that I think we forget. So I would encourage you
Love that.
you can get into the weeds before you get to Christmas and you invite people to respond in a certain way. And then you realize that the response thing that's going out to them or the automated things in your system or the non-automated, or they don't get anything. It doesn't even work. So just secret shop that. Create a new login. How long does it take to create a login? And if you're asking people to log in on Christmas, scratch it and do at least talk about, do something different for Christmas. I really encourage you to do that.
I really do think that that's important because I think if we're using leads, and we're going to move on, but I mean, I think someone who comes on a weekend to your service that was invited by somebody, they made the choice to come, that's probably way more of like what we would call a hot lead. The people that are coming at Christmas would be way warmer. And so I think the way we would approach that would just be, we want to keep them involved, but not push too far, right? We want to we always say we want to invite them to take the next step. So to Brandon's point, always scrub all of your stuff. I think this is a time specifically to go, what are we doing specifically for Christmas to acknowledge them? Okay.
And
Cool.
Lee,
All right.
last thing.
Yes. Go ahead,
Read the
Son.
book. Read the book that Kay's talking about, because if you guys haven't
The
read that
yellow
I
book.
know a lot of you come on here and look for tools, and if you're trying to look for a tool and a resource right now of how to apply this in this season, the book that he's alluding to is fantastic. And so it's Unreasonable Hospitality. It will really make you evaluate some of the things you're working on, but it's a great tool that you can use right now. I don't want it just in the thread. I think that should have been mentioned there. So just want to say that.
Yeah, good. Somebody drop that link in there, if you will, because some of you guys, it's actually a really easy read. Like, it's a fun read. Like, sometimes you get books, you're like, Unreasonable Hospitality, the yellow book. If you like The Bear, if anybody watches The Bear, in the second season, there's the episode where he's cleaning the forks and he gets sent to the really nice restaurant. If you watch that episode quickly, there's about a 30-second shot where he's reading that yellow book in the show. And so it's an easy, fun read, but you can then translate it to what you guys are doing in your church environmental settings. Mike dropped it in there, so there you go. Good mention, Jeff. Okay. All right. So just in a 10 or 15 minute slot, most of this is going to be questions. And the reason I'm going to pose it as this is because we can't do this work on the call. So really, as we were putting this together, and Derek and Kay and I did some work on this, we can't do this work. So we're really going to spend the next 10 minutes kind of just laying this at your feet and going, listen, in the midst of Christmas holiday chaos, 2025 is coming. And one of our Grow Minimum things is we're just always like, okay, where are we headed, right? And so we thought we'd put together some unique questions. They're going to ask similar thoughts, but in a unique way that you might be able. I mean, honestly, you guys, if in the next 3 or 4 weeks you had one morning or afternoon where you could figure out a way to get your team at whatever scale, your decision makers or the key thinkers, for 2 or 3 hours, turn off the holiday flow, turn off the Christmas music, and help them look ahead, right? If you haven't already done it, just say, listen, I love what we're doing because we're going to look ahead and ask some of these questions. It's going to make you not stumble into the new year. Okay. And so here's what we got. Here's some key questions that we'll put up on the screen, and you'll get this deck. Okay. These we posed around the idea of too much. Okay. So these would be questions around, overkill, etc. So let me ask them and describe them a little bit, and then we can get a little bit of feedback. So as you reimagine what 2025 can look like, which is a great way to approach it, by the way. What do we need to reimagine in 2025? What needs to happen? We would encourage you to ask the question number one is, are we doing too much? Okay. We have some tools around that with the ROI tool, some of those other things, but just the ultimate question as you look forward into 2025, here's how you would maybe filter that. Are you looking at the calendar and you're already exhausted? You're already like out of breath. You're already worried. How's my team going to carry this? You're probably doing too much. All right. So ask the question, where is the intentionality around our calendar and rhythm in 2025? If you say yes to any of these questions, dig into it. We can help you with some tools. We can jump on a call and talk about some tools, but you have to come to the point where you go, okay, are we doing too much? Because if we're doing too much, then it leads to some other things. Second question, little different, same lane. Are we focusing on too much? In other words, not only are we doing too much, but maybe we're not doing a lot, but man, we're inviting people to so many things that our energy and our attention is focusing on so much that someone said that priority was never originally meant to be a plural term. There never was in the original English a plural. It wasn't priorities, because the definition of priority is singular. We created the plural, right? Where we can have many priorities, which actually makes no sense whatsoever, because by nature, priority is singular. So are we focusing on too much? Like, is there too much that we're giving attention to that's making everything kind of disappear? You guys have all said this to your teams, like, is there too much noise? So what do we need to pull back and figure out on focus? One of the things we're going to encourage you guys to do, Cave, can you go to the Church on Mission diagram and speed ahead real quick? One of the ways that this could be a thing for you guys is if you're using like Church on Mission, or you have some degree of structure around here's how we do it. So this is our recommended, here's how we do it, biblical engagement, discipleship model. We have a lot of guys right now that are asking the question, is there one or two of these key elements of engagement that we can focus on in 2025? Realizing that biblically in discipleship, we want all of these things to be true, but potentially there's one in particular that we want to focus on. So there's a church in Dallas right now that's made the decision to dedicate 2025 to connect deeply. So they're kicking off the year with a series of messages around tables, they're calling it. I really love the idea. So they're talking about all the places in scripture where people sit at a table, and they're going to launch an initiative for 2025. It's not a big church, around what does it look like for us to connect deeply and come to the table in 2025? So they are singularly focusing on that element. So ask yourself and your team the question, are we focusing on too much? All right, let's go back, Kay, one more, two more, and then I'll open it up. He's trying to go back. There it is. Are we processing too much? That would be the question of like, did we spend 2024 just circling and we didn't execute as much as we should? Maybe that's your culture and you need to stop it. Like maybe in 2025, part of your goal is we got to start actually moving, right? We got to actually, Derek, what's the phrase you use here? We have to like ship it. Is that what you said the other day?
Yeah, just ship it.
Something.
Yep.
Yeah, just ship it. Like some of you guys, you need a first step for your guests, and you've been building out content for your guests for 9 months, and you still haven't launched the step for your guests, but you're wrestling. Like, just stop. Like, your guests don't care about your like. Go, like, get them in that space. So ask the question, are you incessantly circling? Do you need to move more towards a posture of execution? And then
in
finally,
software, there's
go
a
ahead,
concept
Ken.
called MVP, which is minimal viable product. You got to ship the minimal viable product, basically 1.0, to be able to refine it, to be able to get to 2.0. But if you wait to launch 2.0, you'll never launch it. So it's the same concept.
That exactly. And some of us, we just spend so much time, and it's like, I get it. We got to plan and process. But at some point in 2025, some of you may need to just get your teams moving and stop circling. Okay. Then the last one is, are we asking too much? And this is a little different than what you might think, in the sense that if you read the smaller print, we would encourage you to ponder the pace of your people's energy and engagement. Sometimes we spend a lot of time, it's probably appropriate, for sure it is, talking about our team and our staff and the weight they can carry and all those things, and it's completely appropriate. But I think we also have to consider, especially target audience, what is their pace of life? What is their level of energy? And are we appropriately calculating that as we put energy on the questions above around focus and doing? And are we actually adequately providing the space for them to grow in their relationship with Christ and to connect more deeply in the church? Or are we just, are we literally eliminating 80% of our congregation because there's no freaking way they could do all the things that we're asking them to do? Right? Some of us are frustrated with the EGRs in our church that are showing up for everything, because when somebody shows up for everything editorially now, I worry about them. Like, do you not have a life? Like, what is happening right now? And so, you know, if you have the same 10%, 20% of your people showing up for everything, it's probably a systemic issue, right? We need to figure out how to widen that engagement a little bit. And sometimes we need to narrow our focus and narrow what we're doing in order to widen the engagement of who's actually doing it. Okay, I'm going to leave those questions up. Feedback on the call. Unmute, disagree, it's fine, or agree, or ask for prayer. Okay, these are the too much questions. Let's go to the next slide. These are the enough questions. So these are kind of the, okay, I didn't get a chance to talk to you, so I'll do it on the call. I was trying to figure out how to create a spectrum with these, right? Like one side, the other, but I need your brain to figure that out. But those are the too much questions. These are the ones that would actually be asking the other question of, are we doing enough of this? So other filter. So these are, number one, in 2025, ask the question, are we innovating enough? Have we been innovating enough? Are we just stuck? We run the same play? Are the ideologists in the room helping us make change? Those things. Are we uncomfortable enough? That's a great book. There's another book you guys can read over the holidays. Derek, you can drop it in the chat. It's not it's called Comfort Crisis. It's written by a guy here in Vegas at UNLV called Michael Easter. I just got done reading that. It's pretty interesting. He talks about the cultural crisis we're having around seeking and pursuing comfort. And I think if you read it through the lens of church ministry and your personal life, it could be pretty interesting for you to think about, are our people comfortable, too comfortable? Is our staff too comfortable? So are we uncomfortable enough? There needs to be a level of faith, risk, and uncomfortability that gets us into 2025. Like if you're sitting in the call, if I can just be bold, and you're just kind of going, yeah, 2025 is good. We planned it out. It's cool. Like the calendar's in place. We're going to run the play. And if you're really, really comfortable that everything's good and there's nothing that's kind of like, I don't know how, I would invite you to go back and prayerfully scrub that again. You know, there may be a level of discomfort that needs to live in 2025 that you've yet to discover. Number 3 is, are we consistent enough? Right? That's the question of like, are we doing the things that we know, have learned? Are we church on mission, our rhythms of discipleship, that we're doing it in a consistent pattern, that we're not being erratic in how we're leading our people and our teams? And then finally, there it is. Are we praying enough? And this is just that convicting thing around, as we talk strategy, you know, one of our things, led of the Spirit, where the strategy. So all of this reimagining 2025, all of our Christmas stuff that we're doing, let's not fail to bathe it in a level of prayer. Cool? Thoughts?
I have a question. I'd love you to connect on just for a second. I know a lot of us for January are leaning into vision casting for the new year. And I wonder if I think you and I have texted some about this, but I wonder if there are other men and women on the call too that wrestle with just obviously casting new vision. And sometimes some years feel like more inspiring visions than others. Like there's a bigger mountain, like for instance, 2 years ago when we planted another campus and we're a year old there, but we're not ready to do another one just yet, things like that. So it feels the vision casting feels a bit less than and feels dimmer. And so because of that, I as a vision caster sometimes feel I feel uninspired a bit because it doesn't feel like it's the same mountain to climb. Could you just talk to that for a minute? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
You know, and this is what Nathan's saying, but I think we've all understood that in ministry, one of the unspoken things is, in the absence of vision, pastors build buildings. And so, and probably now we would say, in the absence of vision, we plant campuses or something, right? Like it's sort of like, if we don't know what to do, we do those things. It's a bit unfair, but that's true. And Nathan, I think your point is well taken. Here's and I'll give my point, and I'll let Kay or some of our other guys speak to it. I would go back to a moment ago, Nathan. I think I love what you're saying, and you and I have had lots of conversations. I think vision doesn't have to be as massive as sometimes we assume it has to be. I think that's actually where we probably get into a little bit of a conundrum, because we do think of it that way. So I would encourage you to go back, even on like the Church on Mission, and scrub, like, is there a vision around one element that we would like to me, if we can keep our 5 or 10 year vision that's in place, most of you have that or should establish that. And we can go back and start to ask the question, what is the element or two this year that we can massively focus on to raise the level of engagement and momentum around our people? I think we can build a vision around that. That doesn't have to be, it's not always going to be at the same level of mountain to climb, but I still think it's really, really important that we have that and that we've identified it.
That's good.
For example, if you're a church that's light on influence daily, which is the interesting part of our church on mission, there's nothing that doesn't say, man, I'm going to get a vision for 2025 that where we would say where we pour gasoline on influence daily, right? So we're going to build out an initiative for 2025 that sprinkles in opportunities to raise the bar around influence daily. If there's something on the screen right now that you're going, man, we need our gatherings to just have more energy. We need to put a lot more we can cast vision around that, right? Or different elements. So there's elements of this that we can cast vision around that don't necessarily involve the typical vision, right, of building a campus or fundraising. Which sort of leads us to this last slide. Okay, just keep going. Thank you, Nathan, for the setup. And we'll wrap with this. We always advocate a one-year plan. So some of you have run our SMP process with your team. Some of you need to this year. Some of you need to refresh them, which is like one day, where we take the vision, we break it down into a 3-year view, right? And then we go, okay, what is the one-year plan? And in some ways, to Nathan's question, the one-year plan can serve as a vision, even though there's a lot of execution for your coming year. So you begin to ask the question, what are the 4 or 5 specific priorities and or initiatives that we can holistically as a team focus on in 2025? What are they? And you can actually cast vision to your church around those in some ways that are pretty powerful. We put some examples on here. I didn't actually look too deeply at the examples, so some of you may end up on the screen right now. There's Tony. But these are just examples that you will get when you get this deck. But you can see some of these examples that are there that people are running for the coming year. That this is actually Derek's. He's here on the call. That they're getting ready. Like they've got one. Pause on here. See, so they've got one around invite culture. So I assume Chris, as their lead guy, is gonna at some point cast vision around how do we raise the bar for our invite culture? How do we scrub everything towards the person who's not here yet? How do we create initiatives around how do we teach people evangelism, loving their neighbor, those things? So don't sleep on the fact that some of these one-year plan items can actually really pour fuel on the vision that you want to cast. But you're going to have to do some of the work to get your team, ask some of those questions to identify the 4 or 5 primary initiatives that you should be running for the year. It's not too late to do it. Some of you have already done it. Some of you need to do it, but it's not too late to do it. That can actually drive the vision that you cast in the year for the year. Okay, you want to add anything to that or any of the guys before we wind it down?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, what is that to be able to move? The reason why we do the 10-year and the 3-year is the 1 year really should feed into the bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. But if you don't have that, start with the 1 year and and then start zooming back out on that. And there's many of you guys that have a focus and initiative for each year that you do. Align that a little bit more towards the vision. That's basically what we're challenging, what we're recommending.
Cool. All right. One last thing that we would fail. So we want to offer you guys a couple things. So number one, because you're part of our Growmentum network, you've jumped on these calls. Some of you are new, you didn't know, but you're like a new person at Christmas. You're in our database now. You're part of our network. So there you go. You opted in. Just 2 or 3 things that we would love to offer to you. Number one, if whether you've been on these calls for years or not, and you're like, man, I could really use 30 minutes to unpack some of this stuff that we talked about today, or talk to somebody from the team, or just reach out to us. You can put it in the chat if you want. Some of our guys will scrub the chat out, or you can reach out via email to myself or Kay, and we'll connect you either with us or one of our guys on our Growmentum team. If you're like, and again, this is just for us to give to you, like you're like, hey, I just love to talk through some of this in my context. This sounds great, but it doesn't work in my context. Great, help me. We'd love to do that. Some of you need to have a conversation with us about this SMP. You've been talking to us, or you've never heard of it. You're not sure what it is. But this 2-day is really going to launch you into what your 10-year vision, 3-year view, and 1-year plan is. We're watching churches all over the place in the last couple of years just really start to see impact. Some of it numeric and growth, but just generally a lot of alignment and a lot of real impact for the kingdom, because they're all on the same page. And we believe this SMP process is powerful. And then some of you have done it. You need to refresh that. And then if you just like one of our Growmentum guys just to jump on a plane and come hang out with you for a day, and we can eat meals and just kind of assess where you are before you jump in deeper, we can do that too. So we just wanted, as we finalize the year, to offer that to you. If you need some of that stuff, or are interested in having a conversation, that would be awesome. Okay, I'm gonna ask Derek before everybody jumps off just to pray and close out our convo, and specifically for all this Christmas stuff that's happening in the next 4 weeks. Derek, I know you're feeling spiritual today, bro. I know you've been up all day praying, so you're ready for this.
All right, let's do it. God, pray for all of these pastors and leaders that are on this call. And as we step into the next 6 weeks, give us energy, give us wisdom. God, help us to see ways that you are working in our church. And God, even just spark some stuff from our time today on ways that we can best steward what you've given us. We want to meet people where they're at. And so when it comes to exposing them to our church, like Kay talked about, creating endearment, God, just help us do that in the way and context you've uniquely put us. And so I pray favor and blessing over the churches, pastors, and people represented on our call today. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right,
Praying for
guys.
you guys.
We'll send this out. We'll see you guys in the new year. All right. Hope you have an incredible time.